Walk through an Egyptian village at noon 3,000 years ago, and you won't find a single person outside. The alleys are empty, the market stalls sit, shaded and abandoned. Doors are shut tight against the light. Somewhere behind those mud brick walls, an entire town has simply disappeared. For years, people online have pointed to one strange detail as the secret behind Egyptian cool. Pointed wax cones worn on the head, supposedly melting slowly through the day. It's a satisfying story. It's also almost certainly wrong. In 2019, archaeologists finally dug up two of those cones for the first time in history, and what they found inside rewrote the whole explanation. The site was Amarna, a short-lived capital built by the pharaoh Akhenaten. Archaeologist Anna Stevens and her team were excavating ordinary graves there, not royal tombs. Inside two of them, they found the wax cones still resting on the skulls. For decades, historians had assumed these cones held scented fat, something like solid perfume that would soften in the heat and drip down, cooling the wearer while releasing fragrance. It's a lovely idea, but when researchers tested the wax, they found no trace of oil, resin, or perfume at all. Whatever those cones meant, cooling probably wasn't the point. Some experts now think they marked people connected to fertility or performance or the presence of the gods, which leaves the original question wide open. If a melting hat wasn't the trick, how did an entire civilization function through summers that regularly pushed past 40 degrees Celsius, all without a single fan or drop of electricity? The answer isn't one clever object. It's a whole system, built into the walls, the clothes, and the daily clock itself. Start with the houses. Most ancient Egyptians didn't live in stone palaces. They lived in homes made of mud brick formed from Nile silt, straw, and water, then dried hard under the sun. Mud sounds like a flimsy building material. Physically, it's almost the opposite. Mud is a poor conductor of heat, meaning it soaks up warmth slowly during the day and releases it slowly at night. Pack that material into a thick wall, and the house effectively delays the heat outside from ever reaching the people inside. Egyptian archaeologists studying these structures have suggested that some ancient homes stayed close to a stable 22 degrees Celsius year-round, summer and winter alike. That's roughly room temperature inside a desert without any machinery at all. And the walls were only the beginning. Wealthier homes were often built around an open central courtyard. During the day, the doors facing that courtyard stayed shut, sealing the cooler air inside the rooms. At night, when the desert temperature dropped, those same doors were opened wide. Warm air trapped in the house rose up and escaped through the courtyard. Cooler night air flowed in behind it, settling into the rooms below. By morning, the house had been quietly recharged with cool air ready to be sealed shut again before the sun climbed high. Modern architects have a name for this exact trick. They call it night-purge ventilation, and it still shows up in eco-friendly building design today. The Egyptians were doing it with mud brick and a doorway, thousands of years before anyone coined the term. Some homes went a step further, adding a structure on the roof shaped like a triangular funnel. It's called a malqaf, and it was built to face north toward Egypt's prevailing breeze off the Mediterranean. The funnel caught that wind and forced it downward through a shaft, pushing fresh air straight into the rooms below. Researchers studying the technology have traced wind-catching structures in Egypt back roughly 3,300 years, among the oldest known examples anywhere in the world. Some scholars argue Egypt invented the idea. First, others credit ancient Persia. Either way, the concept spread across the region and never really left. In some later cities, wind-catching towers rose higher than the surrounding rooftops, pulling in breezes that never reached street level at all. Walk through the desert city of Yazd in Iran today, and you'll still see towers doing the same job the malqaf did in Amarna. Architecture handled the building. For the air passing through it, Egyptians turned to something even simpler: water. They soaked reed mats or woven cloth and hung them across doorways and windows. As dry desert air pushed through the damp material, the water evaporated, and evaporation pulls heat out of the surrounding air as it happens. The air coming through the other side was noticeably cooler and slightly more humid, which felt like relief in a climate. This dry, some households used the same principle with porous clay jars, filling them with water and setting them where a breeze could reach them. As moisture seeped through the clay and evaporated on the surface, it chilled both the jar and the air around it. It's the same basic physics behind a modern swamp cooler. The Egyptians just built theirs out of river clay and reeds. The body needed its own defenses too. Egyptian clothing was almost entirely linen woven from flax grown along the Nile. Linen is lightweight, breathable, and loose enough to let air move freely against the skin. Most of it was left pale or white, a color that reflects sunlight rather than absorbing it. Laborers often worked bare-chested in simple linen kilts, cutting down on fabric and heat both. Wigs, oddly enough, played a cooling role as well. Many Egyptians shaved their heads to stay cleaner and cooler, then wore a wig on top for shade and appearance. And around the eyes, they lined the skin with kohl, a dark pigment ground from minerals like galena. Beyond its striking look, kohl cut down on glare from the sun, the same basic function modern athletes get from the black eye paint under their eyes. Some Egyptologists also suspect the mineral base of kohl had a mild antibacterial effect, guarding against the eye infections that spread easily in hot, dusty conditions. For anyone stepping outside at the wrong hour, palm leaf parasols offered one more line of defense, shading the head and shoulders on the move. Cooling the body from the inside mattered just as much as cooling it from the outside. Egyptians drank large amounts of a thick, low-alcohol beer brewed from barley or emmer wheat. It delivered calories for people doing hard physical labor, and the fermentation process made it safer than water pulled straight from an irrigation canal. Whenever they could, people cooled off directly in the Nile, wading in during breaks from farming or after a long shift under the sun. Children in particular spent long stretches of the day in the river, splashing in water that stayed noticeably cooler than the air around it. The Nile wasn't only Egypt's lifeline for farming, it doubled as the country's public swimming pool. None of this mattered without timing. Egyptian daily life was built around the sun's schedule, not against it. Farmers left home at first light, working the fields early, while the air still carried some of the night's coolness. By the time the sun climbed toward its highest point, most outdoor labor had already wound down. That was the hour to retreat indoors, behind those thick mud-brick walls waiting out the worst of the heat. Work often resumed later, once the afternoon sun had started to soften. At night, many families climbed onto flat rooftops to sleep, catching whatever breeze moved above the streets, away from walls still holding the day's warmth. It's the same reason that village at noon looked abandoned. Nobody had given up on the day. They'd simply moved it somewhere the sun couldn't reach. So the wax cone wasn't the trick after all. The real trick was never a single object anyone could point to. It was walls that stored coolness like a battery, courtyards that breathed at night, funnels that caught the wind, water that cooled the air as it vanished, cloth that let the body exhale, and a clock that simply refused to fight the sun at noon. Every piece did a small job, and together they added up to something that functioned like climate control, built entirely from mud, wind, water, and timing. Some of it never really disappeared. Windcatchers modeled on the same idea, still cool buildings across the Middle East today, without burning a single watt of electricity. As engineers search for ways to cool cities without draining the power grid, they keep circling back to the same basic answers. A village on the Nile had already worked out, thousands of years before anyone needed to write them down. The streets at noon weren't empty because Egyptians had lost the fight against their own climate. They were empty because Egyptians had already won it.